Hi guys, Lewis here, and in this video we're going to be looking at Visual Composer and just how it performs in recreating Trello's homepage. So if I scroll through here, you can see that it's a very well designed page. There's a lot of colors, a lot of images, different layout styles going on, and really this is a great website to use for this experiment, just to see how Visual Composer handles the slightly more complex elements that are going on here. So I'm going to switch over to the page that I've set up. This is just a blank page at the moment. So far I've uploaded all the images from the Trello's homepage, and I'll be taking some colors from there as well, just to try and get this looking exactly as it does on Trello's website. Now obviously it's going to take me a while, so I'm going to speed up this video and I'll slow it down whenever there's something that I need to address. Okay, so I've run into a few problems here. The first one is the logo, and what I've noticed with Visual Composer is that it doesn't give you an image slider. Instead, it asks you to define the size of the image based on thumbnail, medium, large, or full. Now, obviously, this is not a great indicator. The only other alternative is to specify the exact dimensions by pixel. The problem there is that you have to scale it down yourself. So I don't know the exact dimensions of this image, and I don't want to be trying to work out what the scaled down dimensions are every time I add an image. So really this is massively broken in my opinion. There's no feasible way to scale this down without breaking the proportion and without stretching it one way or another. So at the moment I can go for medium and hope that that's a better fit. It hasn't changed in this case, so that's a really poor design choice there. And with the buttons here, there are a few issues. Obviously they are not aligned, they're stacking on top of each other, which is not what I want. But secondly, with the colors, which I found really odd, was that you can't set the actual color of it. You can only choose from some predefined colors. So I've had to go with classic blue here and classic green, which are fairly close, but they're not exactly what I wanted. And I can see this being a massive problem in some scenarios. I'm not sure why they wouldn't let you choose a color for the button. It just seems really, really odd. So those problems there have resulted in a navigation menu, a top bar menu that isn't anywhere close to what I'm after. But I'm going to continue anyway. Okay, just finished the next section, and there's a few things I need to run through here. So the first is the font or the text. In this case, this is a heading, and what I found was that I wasn't able to change the actual font size without changing the heading here. So a heading 2 would be smaller, heading 3 smaller still. And the problem is it takes these values from my theme. I have no control over it on the page level, which means I can't get this exactly how I want it to look in this case. And the same applies to the font family as well. So what I'm trying to get at is that on a page level, Visual Composer is very limited in terms of what you can do to have control over that page specifically. And the same also applies to link colors, for example. My site particularly has orange links. I'm looking for a blue link here, and there's no way I can change that without going into the CSS. So very limited with text, which is very, very annoying in this case. The next thing is the background image. So as you can see, I've added a background image here, and what's happened is I've got too much of it at the top and not enough at the bottom. It's cut it off, and it's also repeating here. You can see that it starts to repeat itself. The problem is there's no control over how this background image displays, at least none that I've found, and at least none that I've found without going into the CSS, and that's not something that I'm going to be doing in these videos. So overall, the problem that I seem to be getting here, and it's a recurring theme, is that there's just not enough options there to get things looking the way that you really need them to look. Okay, so for this next section, it wasn't too bad actually. I was able to copy this down here and change the text. For the image, this time the size wasn't too much of an issue, but again, that's just being lucky in the sense that typing in large happened to be what I was after. Okay, so for this section here, what you'll notice on Trello's site is that it actually overlays on the section before it, so it has a negative margin to pull it up, and it's got some transparency as well. So I've tried to replicate this with Visual Composer, but there's two issues that I'm seeing. The first is that there's no way to set the opacity of the background color. So this is just a solid color. There's no way to control that. And also, if I set a negative margin to pull this up, it doesn't behave the way you would expect. It actually stretches the row upwards. So it's impossible to do this without custom CSS. There's also some margin issues here that I need to fix. But also, there was one thing earlier that I forgot to mention, and that's with these, with the width of these text elements here. So normally what you would expect is to be able to resize the element width, the container. But in this case, what I've been having to do is set a margin left and right. You could do this with padding as well. But it's not. It doesn't feel like the correct way to do it, and this is a problem I had with another page builder. I believe it was Beaver Builder, and it's something that I think it just doesn't feel right when you're building a page. I'm sure it would lead to some to issues on certain devices. Again, there should be a better way to do this. Having to continuously tweak the margins and paddings either side of an element, it's not intuitive at all. So that's what I'm going with at the moment. I just thought I'd point that out because I did forget to mention it above. But anyway, I'm gonna carry on as usual. Okay, for this section we've got a background gradient, and we also have a very noticeable drop shadow on the image. Now in Visual Composer I've had to go with a solid color and no drop shadow because neither of those are possible with the customization options that I'm given. Again, you'd have to go into CSS in order to achieve that. Okay, just to recap the last two sections, they were easy enough to make. Obviously, we're missing some things that I mentioned before, such as the drop shadows on the images of the button. Um, the button color here is predefined. Again, I can't set the color of that. I was able to pull this image off the screen to the right using negative margin. That worked quite well. For this section, what I found was I had to readjust the margins to get this text where I needed it to be. It would have been great to just drag this column in and out in order to have that looking how I need. But you know, it still worked. It was a long way around, but it still worked. This color I'm not very happy with. It's quite far from what it should be. Perhaps I can tweak that, but without going into CSS, it's never going to be perfect. So again, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so for this section, we've got a couple really big issues. The first, as you can see, these images are really big. They should be like this, and they should also be side by side. So tackling the first problem, the size, it was just a matter of time before we ran into this. The options given to us, which are medium, large, full, and thumbnail, are not at all close. And the only way to scale this down is to actually specify the width and height in pixels. I don't know these at this stage, and I'm not gonna go into the CSS, as I've said before. So this is the way it is. This is what you're stuck with, and there's no way to align these side by side as well. So this is as good as it gets for this section, which is a shame because it's really not okay as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so I'm just about done with the rebuild. I'm going to do a quick comparison now. So I'm going to save the draft, let that save, and then I'm going to open the page here and refresh. Okay, so let me scroll through, give you a quick preview of how it looks. And in comparison to Trello's homepage, Visual Composer did an okay job at replicating most of these elements, but the big issue that I ran into, and it's really the same issue throughout, is that the limitation with the customization controls mean that you're constantly left with something that just isn't quite right. You're unable to align buttons side by side. You're unable to control the padding on those buttons. I'm unable to control how this background image looks in that row. I'm unable to set the opacity here. I'm unable to set the exact color that I want for these buttons. I'm unable to set the image sizes that I want without having to know the dimensions of that image and scale them down proportionally, which is obviously ridiculous to expect from a user. I'm unable to set the fonts that I want, the font sizes that I want. So it's really just overall limitation on the customization. And really, if you really want to dive into this and get it looking exactly how it does on the Trello site, you could do that with custom CSS, but I believe that defeats the whole purpose of a page builder. And I don't think it would be that difficult to implement some of these options in the customization window. And just by doing that, I think that we could get very close to the Trello homepage. But in this case, it just wasn't possible to get it exactly as I wanted it. There are more than just a few issues here. So that's the end of the experiment. I think Visual Composer has shown that it's not really capable of replicating Trello's homepage. Ran into more issues than I'd be comfortable with if this was my main page builder. And overall, I'd say that it wasn't a successful rebuild. So that's the end of the video. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.